Shabbat shalom, everybody. Thank you for joining us for another edition of this week's Torah portion here at Life of Worship Ministries. I'm so glad to see you guys hanging out there in the chat room as we're getting ready, putting things together. And who's already jumped in here with us so far? Shabbat shalom. We got Linda and Shannon and Rexana and Al and Irene and who else? Did I say Joe? Joe, and okay, well, there we go. That's who I see so far that's checked in. Everybody else that oh, and Sandi, by the way, she's over there in the other room, and because I'm right back here in this wonderful living room. Can you imagine? See, yeah, it's a grand piano there in the background. No, just kidding. I'm sure you guys have seen this virtual background in other podcasts, but nevertheless, yeah, Jonathan and Amarillo are with us here. We've had to make some adjustments today, and so it's just me, and it's okay. So, by the way, if you're those that are joining us, if you didn't read the little description over in Facebook, this is our only streamcast today. This is the only one we're doing. We're not going to have praise and worship. We're not going to have a message just because of circumstances right now, and the reason is well, it's just, I just have to say, in the Craig household and in the Freeman household and among others, that there is a sickness going around, and so we are just doing it this way, and we just don't want to expose anybody else. By the way, Pastor Sandy's doing fine. She's doing good. She's just in the other room, and but we have house guests, and we have whatever it is that's going around. We just didn't want anybody to be exposed to it, and we want to keep everybody healthy, so it's better just to do it virtually. So I hope that's okay today, and I hope it's okay that Linda, I'm glad you're better. Yeah, absolutely. And so we need to be praying for all that are involved, not only here with us at Life of Worship, but others across the nation are dealing with this, whatever the stomach bug is. And others are having upper respiratory stuff. And then there's others that need healing as well. You know, we've been praying for Eddie and Tammy. Tammy's been dealing with the knee issue, and praise Yah, she's getting all healed up there. That is wonderful. However, Eddie has dealt with an episode. Many of you already know that we've been praying for Eddie specifically because of an issue with a blood clot and a stroke, and so they are going through diagnostics and figuring out what's going on, and we're praying for complete healing and restoration for Eddie Johnson. So anyway, that's where we are going to stand with that. Hey, so with that said, let's pray. We need to pray. We need to get started, jump into the word, and pray for those that need healing. So, Father, right now, in the name of Yeshua, we just come to bless you, and we honor you because you're good and you're faithful, and you're watching over your children. And even as you watched over the children of Israel to escort them and lead them out of Egypt, and so we look forward to another Exodus that is to come. You brought them to a mountain, to a safe place, to the place where your presence is. And there were, as long as they would listen and obey and hear and do your word, that healing belonged to them. You expressed yourself as Yehovah Rapha, as we learned that last week in the Torah portion, or as we discussed. So, but even still now, Father, we come that we would be healed, that we'd be healed in our souls, our mind, our will, our emotions, in our bodies, and that we are fully walking in the midst of that which you provided for us originally in the garden. We want to enter into that fullness and that wholeness that that your desire is, your purpose and your plan for us from the very beginning. And so, Father, we ask for ears to hear, eyes to see, that we be able to see great and wonderful things that you have in store for us here in your word today. We desire the fullness of your presence, that we would be filled with your Ruach HaKodesh, and that the fullness of the blessing of the Shabbat would be upon us. And the Shabbat shalom, where there's nothing missing, nothing broken, fullness, wholeness, and completeness. Father, we thank you that we have the example that Yeshua gave to us, that it was okay to heal on the Shabbat, that Yeshua expressed the full desire of your heart, showing your loving kindness and your mercy that overflows on the Shabbat. And so we thank you for that double portion today, that which we gather all throughout the week which brings healing. It brings restoration. It brings nourishment. It brings satisfaction. It satiates us, but it's a doubly portioned to us today on the Shabbat that you have provided, and we can rest in your presence. And so, Father, we just bless you and thank you for that. For those that need healing, Jonathan and Amarillo here at the house, and Alora and Killian and Rick and Joy and all those that are fighting this intestinal bug, we just lift them up before you as to pour out your healing and your blessing in the name of Yeshua. And those that are exposed to your protection and bolstering all of our immune systems, and those that are also dealing with it across the country, across the city, among us at Life of Worship, healing and restoration, and to pour out your goodness upon us, as well as those that are not just afflicted by this stomach flu, but also those that are dealing with other issues of dis-ease within the bodies. That, Father, for Eddie, complete healing and restoration, blood flow restored to those areas within the brain that are affecting his verbal and his motor skills, and complete restoration and healing, and that there be no permanent damage, but, Father, that there is full function of those areas of the brain that were affected. And that, Father, that his blood vessels are opened up and they're cleared out, and all the clots that would have caused the affliction completely dissolved and dissipated in the name of Yeshua. And that, Father, we just thank you. Even those that whatever it is, those specific or non-specific, the prayer requests regarding healing, you know what they are, because you are Yehovah Rapha. You are the Yah who heals us of all of our diseases, and that you have made the provision through the cross, through the tree, where life flows and life flows down. And so, Father, we thank you that by the stripes of Yeshua that we are healed. Father, we just thank you. And we thank you for this Torah portion. And we thank you for what we're about to see and what we're about to experience because of the revelation that you're going to open up and show us today. We just bless you and thank you and honor you in the name of Yeshua. Hallelujah. So here we are. And yeah, hedge of protection around everyone. I completely agree, Al. And from all manner of diseases. You know what I think is also pretty cool? And Pastor Sandi is going to be continuing on with her message for healing, regarding healing. She started last week. She's going to have another part 2 to that this week canceled, because we wanted to make sure that we could have anybody and everybody that could join us here at Life of Worship. So as she gives this message, that we also have give opportunity to pray for those locally that are inspired within that message and that desire healing. And I'm telling you, there are no parameters, by the way. There are no limitations, let me put it that way, on healing. You know, some people just say, well, this is just my lot in life. Well, I don't accept that. I don't accept that at all. And yeah, Al, no weapon formed against you shall prosper, and every tongue that rises against you in judgment, you shall prove wrong. This is the inheritance of the servants of Yahweh. That is absolutely right. And Linda, Psalm 91, boy, just draw close. Oh, talk about Psalm 91 and connecting to this week's Torah portion. I like it. I like it. I really like it. Thank you, Linda, for bringing that up. And so I'm looking for Lou to pop up there in the chat. So Luann, we love you too, and we miss you. And I'm just guessing you guys are hanging out together. But let's look at this Torah portion. I like this Torah portion, and if you've been around me long enough, you hear me referencing. You've been referencing this parts of this Torah portion a lot. I mean, you're going to hear me reference it throughout the course of the year, throughout all different things. I may not say Yitro, but I'll reference the scriptures that are around it. And why? Because it's so cool. I really like it. And so here we go. Okay, good. Thank you, Linda. And but that's all right. She doesn't have to participate in the chat. That's cool too. Exodus chapter 18, verse 1 is where it begins. and it runs through Exodus chapter 20, verse 26. And some places out there, it'll say like it runs through verse 23. But then the following Torah portion begins with, which is Mishpatim, which begins in chapter 21, verse 1. And you think, well, what happened to the rest of the chapter of chapter 20? Well, I think that's the differences between the Jewish Bible and the versions of the Bible that most of us use. And so if you're wondering, and why does it cut off and then skip some verses before it goes into Mishpatim next week? It has to do with the verse placement. And so we're not going to cut off the verse just because of verse placement between different versions of the Bible. Okay, there you go. That's where I wanted to go. Let's look at some things as we look at Exodus chapter 18. And because it's me, you're going to have to put up with my reading today. And so it begins in verse 1. It says, now Jethro in many English versions, Yitro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard all that Elohim had done for Moses and for Israel, his people, how Yahweh had brought Israel out of Egypt, out of Mishpatim. So Yitro, Moses' father-in-law, took Moses' wife Zipporah after he had sent her away, and her two sons, of whom one was named Gershom, for he had said, I have been a sojourner in a foreign land, and the other was named Eleazar, for he said, the Elohim of my father was my help and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. Then Yitro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife to Moses in the wilderness where he was camped at the mount of Elohim. And he sent word to Moses, I, your father-in-law Yitro, am coming to you with your wife and your two sons with her. Then Moses went out to meet his father-in-law, and he bowed down and he kissed them, and they asked each other of their welfare, and they went into the tent. Now, I'm going to stop right there because that's loaded. It's loaded with all sorts of stuff. And a lot of times people think, Yitro, they meet up in the wilderness, and then they kind of hang out together. And then we see that Yitro gives him good advice because, Moses is wearing himself out, being the judge over all of Israel. And he says, you need to delegate, and you need to say, because we want you to survive. Don't overdo it. And so delegate, and only the more weightier matters, let them bring that to you. So, we know about Yitro's counsel, and a lot of people think about it in terms of that, but I want to go back and look at a little bit more about this encounter, because this encounter is very interesting because it tells us a lot. If we actually even go back and look, for example, and where we see Yitro first being introduced, that let me see if I can find that verse. It's over in chapter 3 in Exodus. And, well, is it chapter 3? No, chapter 3. Well, let's go back. Okay, let's go back. I think it's over in Exodus. Maybe it's Exodus chapter 2. So I'm going to, everybody go back there with me to the verse, because there are certain things I wanted to bring these out, and I just didn't write all these verses down for you. So we're going to look at it. So what happened? Moses is fleeing Egypt, right? That's the whole reason that Moses has an encounter with Yitro in the first place. And so this encounter in chapter 18 is just more about the story about this relationship between Moses and his father-in-law. And so if we go and we look at chapter 2, verse 15, that it says, so chapter 2, Exodus chapter 2, verse 15, when Pharaoh heard of this matter, he tried to kill Moses, but Moses fled from the presence of Pharaoh and settled in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came to draw water and fill the troughs to water their father's flock. Then the shepherds came and drove them away, but Moses stood up and helped them and watered their flock. When they came to Reuel, their father, he said, why have you come back so soon today? So this is kind of an interesting, it's actually, to me, I find it very interesting, this different connection. So it's in chapter 2. I'm going to go back to chapter 2, verse 18, and look at his name. because we have this name Yitro, is one sense, but then it says they came to Ruel. Ruel. Well, why is he named two different names? Is one of the questions that I have. And so let's look at Ruel, and which means friend of Yah. It's made up of two different words. So let me just pull that up, because I'm looking at, I'm using my eSword right now. We're kind of doing it live time. And of course, while I'm doing it here in live time, there's a little bit of delay. So Ruel, friend of Yah. Now, do you remember that song that was done back in, I think it was back in the 90s? Yeah, in the 90s. And I am a friend of Yah. And I think it's like kind of a theme song that a major, very large mega church down in Houston used to sing. But very anointed worship leader that they had, a graduate of Christ for the Nations, by the way. And so Ruel means friend of Yah, and it's made up of two words. One word is reu, which means friend, and of course El. Okay, El, friend of God. So we have a picture of Yitro and his name being a friend of Yah, but it also says, that we have a description that he is a priest of Midian, who has 7 daughters. Now, this is also kind of an interesting connection as well, is because who is Midian? And we have to go back to Abraham and to his marriage to Keturah after the death of Sarah. And knowing that Abraham, now he remarries and he has a lineage, of whom comes out of this lineage is Midian, and who we know that Abraham is a friend of Yah. Correct? We've seen that in the script. Okay, what do you mean by that? Well, let's do. I'm going to do another quick little search here, and look up friend of God, and because I think this is, I mean, we got to really understand some of these connections in here. Friend of God, and see where that shows up within the scripture, because not everybody gets that title. I mean, they like to sing about it. They like to sing about, I am a friend of God, but who really gets that designation? I mean, I think that's really a key. And so in James chapter 2, verse 23, it says, and the scripture was fulfilled, which saith, Abraham believed God, and it was imputed unto him for righteousness, and he was called the friend of God. So isn't it interesting that the name of this priest of Midian, who is a descendant of Abraham, whose very name is called a friend of God, and he's a priest. Now, it also gives another connection here, because a lot of times that we think about in the priesthood of Israel, we have to think back in terms of, well, who would be considered a priest of Israel pre golden calf incident? Okay, because this also gives us a connection in terms of maybe who Moses is, because there's a connection with that. Well, if you look at pre-golden calf, that the priests were always the firstborn sons of the family. They would be the priest of the family, and they would operate in that priesthood. And in that priesthood, then they would also operate in terms of the responsibility of being the one who intercedes, or the one who comes between both God and the family. They're the ones that we would be able to, and would be ordained in order to give the sacrifices, right? To be able to lift up sacrifices to Yah, to bring the peace offering, to bring the sin offerings, to bring, I mean, in other words, to bring these things that causes the family to draw close to the Most High. And so, therefore, being the firstborn of the family gives us a weighty responsibility in terms of what we do, in terms of interceding for our family before the Most High. Our responsibility in terms of praying and interceding for a family, but also to give heed or to hear what the Most High is saying on behalf of our family. So the family may even have questions, or we may have questions as the firstborn son of the family to come and say, Father, I got these questions and I need to hear your voice. And so we come before the Father with the proper protocol in order to be able to hear what the Father's saying, to speak a message, that good word for the family. And so now, do you think Abraham would have abandoned all of this relationship that he would have had with the Father after Sarah dies and he goes off and he marries another woman? I don't think so. I think that those things that he established for Isaac that would be passed on to Jacob, actually supposed to have been for Esau as well, but Esau abandoned that purpose. He did not fulfill the purposes for which Yahweh called him. And so therefore, I mean, remember, Esau, it says that God, that Yahweh hated Esau. Did he hate Esau as much as that there was an estrangement that between him and Esau that could not be rectified because Esau forsook his birthright? And Jacob, rightfully fulfilling that, would carry that forth and into the generation, into his descendants, and which the descendants would need to fulfill. They would need to fulfill those purposes in Egypt and coming out of Egypt, out of which we see Moses, who is properly groomed for the position that he's in. But let's go back to Yitro, because we're seeing now, but you think, but wait a minute, he's out of the lineage. He's out of the proper lineage in terms of carrying forth the priesthood. And well, let's look at what Malachi says about the priesthood that was given to Levi after the golden calf incident. That golden calf incident. So we're going to go over to Malachi, because there is a purpose for Levi. There's a purpose here that needs to be fulfilled, and it's in Malachi chapter 2. But see, there's a weighty responsibility that goes along with it. I mean, that's what we have to look at. So in Malachi chapter 2, verse 4, then you will know that I have sent this commandment to you, that my covenant may continue with Levi, says Yahweh of hosts. My covenant with him was one of life and peace, and I gave them to him as an object of reverence. So he revered me and stood in awe of my name. So let's look at that. In verse 7, for the lips of a priest should preserve knowledge, and men should seek instruction from his mouth, for he is the messenger of Yahweh of hosts. So this is very specific to Levi. We've had some people that actually were part of our congregation that left Life of Worship specifically because of I don't know what the best way to say it is here, is that they felt that in terms of the role of Levi was not being elevated. I don't know what the right way to say it. I just want to be really careful about how I say that. Is the fact that if you look at it in terms of Israel today and what's going on in terms of the priesthood within Israel out of Levi, how it's been usurped by a particular group, we just have to be careful to understand that Levi has a role for eternity, but that role is not to be removed from Levi, but there's another priestly order. And what is that other priestly order? It is the Melchizedek order by which Yeshua fulfills. He fulfills this whole idea of the king and the priest, and it comes out of the tribe of Judah. So there's this separation. And he said, well, we have a priestly role that must be fulfilled to bring instruction, to bring peace, to bring this whole teachings of righteousness that Levi is responsible for. And yet the king of righteousness, the high priest of righteousness, Yeshua, in the order of Melchizedek, it actually takes it to a fulfillment of fulfilling all of the scriptures that takes it back to the garden. Because after all, Adam was not a Jew. He was not of the tribe of Judah. But out of his loins flow a bloodline that that speaks of one that is to come. Now let's go back to Yitro, knowing that this bloodline that comes from Adam that goes to Abraham, and then through the descendants through Keturah, then we have Yitro, a priest of Midian. And you think, well, most of the commentaries out there will actually talk about that this was a pagan priesthood, and there are certain things that are elements within it that you'd say, well, it definitely looks like a pagan, historically a pagan priesthood. But I want to just say there's an element of a thread that brings us back to the garden that is exemplified through Yitro. And you think, well, wait a minute, he's of the wrong lineage. He's, even Moses is of the lineage of Levi. Well, absolutely, it's true. But Moses steps outside of this lineage of Levite because he fulfills a different role, because his brother Aaron fulfills a role of the high priest, but Moses is even of a higher order that takes him outside, even beyond his lineage of Levi, which we're going to look at here in just a little bit. So Yitro, this friend of Yah, who is of Midian, we see some clues. And those clues, in terms of who he is one, by this encounter that we see with Moses here in the wilderness, when Yitro comes and he brings Zipporah and he brings Moses' two sons to him to be reunited in the wilderness. And where did they go? They come to a tent, a particular tent. And of all the different things we understand is this protocol that Moses is following to his father-in-law, and which actually kind of says, there's great respect that Moses has for his father-in-law. Kind of gives us an example how we should treat our father-in-laws. But this great respect after this separation, a separation that is a reuniting, by which also Moses goes to his father-in-law and asks for his blessing before he returns to Egypt, and he gets the blessing. And it also shows this relationship of this high priest of Midian that's respected by Moses. And so now, with Moses, with Yitro coming back to join together, what does Moses do? He bows down before his father-in-law, and then he kisses his father-in-law. So, there's a protocol of in Middle Eastern culture, is that when you come to somebody and that to establish a friendliness and a certain affinity, a certain relationship between two people, that when you greet one another with a holy kiss. You kiss on both cheeks, and sometimes there's three kisses, 1, 2, 3 type of kiss. So it's an interesting thing there. But Moses bows down. That in the culture of the Middle East, you don't necessarily bow down to just anybody. And here Moses is bowing down, and I think it's out of I think it's not just out of reverence, but in reverence to position of priesthood. It gives an idea that there's a priesthood that's outside of a Levitical type of priesthood that is also needs to be recognized here, that in this place that they meet also, so it's a place and it is a person. And in this protocol kind of gives us a reflection of a Melchizedek type of priesthood, one that is outside of the family of Jacob, by which this priesthood would come out of, that we read over there in Malachi. But nevertheless, it is a priesthood that is recognized even by Moses. It's special. It's unique. It's a place that Moses recognizes that a voice of wisdom would come from, and that Moses recognizes as a voice that he should listen to. He should shema. That we even see later on when Yitro says, "Hey, I've got an idea for you," and Moses takes it to heart. Why? because the voice of Yah is speaking through him. And so that's why I think this is very interesting that that we see that. But it's also in the name Midian, because it's out of the name Midian is that we have a uh, uh, a root connection to another name within Scripture, which is the name Edon. Edon. Well, have you ever heard that before? Midian, Edon. So because we have a connection between a two-letter root of the Dalet and the Nun Sofit, the Dalet and the Nun Sofit. So think about when you hear the word Midian, Midian is spelled with the mem. It has the Dalet, the Yod, and the Nun Sofit, Midian, and then we have Edon, which is spelled with the ayin, the Dalet, and the Nun Sofit. So we have that Dan, that Dan. Did you ever hear, isn't there a tribe named Dan? In fact, when you think about the name of Dan, we actually have another idea that comes from that, and it's the meaning, by the way, of, let me go back here to where I looked it up. Dan means a straight course or sail direct. Well, no, I'm sorry, that's Yaan. Let's look at Dan. Dan means to judge, It has it's a primitive root, to judge, contend, or plead, to act as a judge, to minister judgment, to plead a cause, to execute judgment, requite, vindicate, to govern, to contend or to strive, to be at strife or to quarrel with a straight course. So think about how Dan. Now, I'm not talking about the tribe of Dan. I'm talking about in terms of the meaning of the root of the word Edon. So the ayin, Dalet, Nun, Sofit gives us the idea of this place, but where ayin gives us an idea of the vision, to be able to see with proper judgment, And it's also a place by where judgment is executed, but it's also a place where one would plead one's cause. How about this, where Adam, when we go back to Genesis chapter 2, it's a place in the garden, the Gan Eden. It's that place where Adam would walk with Yah in the cool of the day. So would it also be that place where it would also be considered that place where, I'm looking specifically for a verse on that, where Adam is created, but he would plead his case before the Father. Isn't it in Genesis chapter 3 that where after the fall, after the eating of the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that Adam would plead his case before the Father? It's also a place that we would know that the cheruvim would, after the exile of Adam and Chava, after Adam and Mrs. Adam are removed from the garden, that the cheruvim would take the flaming sword that would be, shall we say, wielded back and forth as a guard to the gate of the Garden of Eden. So Adam and Eve, that they are exiled from it, but exiled from the place where one would be presenting their case before the Most High. And so therefore we get this two-letter root of Dan that comes out of Edon, and of course the ayin at the beginning of Edon gives us an idea that this is a place of the vision, to understand or to discern, a place of discerning, as in terms of the place of discerning that was wrongfully used, misused, or wrongfully interpreted as, hey, here's two trees, and these two trees representing maybe two different mountains. a mountain of life and a mountain of a blessing, a mountain and a mountain of cursing, as we see in the Mount Gerizim and Mount Ebal, that we later see over in the land, by which the two the tribes would be divided into two, and they would pronounce the blessings and the curses from. And we get this picture of this flaming sword that would bounce between two different mountains. Because what happens here in Exodus chapter 18 is that they have made their trek, and they've made their journey from Egypt. They've had this great exodus by which they've passed through the waters, and they've come to the other side, a type of immersion, a type of mikvah, where they've been washed, and part of this preparation to come to the mountain means they had to pass through the water, and anybody that would have enmity against the ones that would be exiting Egypt would be prevented from following. But everyone that wanted to be part and participate in, as they come to the mountain, a set of mountains, twin mountains, a Mount Horeb and Mount Sinai, where we get a picture of Mount Horeb, gives us an idea of a cutting, like a flaming sword that is flashing back and forth. And so it didn't, in order to get to the mountain, it certainly has to come with the various trials that represent a revealing of the things that are within our heart that need to be washed away, that need to be cut off, that need, in order for us to be able to present ourselves at the mountain, that in this place at the mountain, where Moses said, hey, you've got to prepare yourself for 3 days and don't even come near a woman, but wash your clothes, so that on the third day, this is Exodus chapter 19, verse 16, so it came about on the third day when it was morning that they were prepared and ready. That on verse 15 it says, and he said to the people, be ready for the third day, do not go near a woman. So it came about on the third day, on this morning, that something happened, something's really big. But there's also this connection with judge, dawn, that also is revealed to us in this encounter with Yitro. Because in chapter 18, verse 13, and it came about the next day that Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood about Moses from the morning until the evening. So this place that they've come to, this place of Mount Sinai and Mount Horeb, by which Moses has set up a tent and the people gather around him at the tent. Why? Because Moses is in the position of the seat of judgment. And maybe perhaps that's where we get where Moses is read at this seat, at this judgment seat. It's a great representation that it gives us, one, a position that we see with Moses, because Moses was given the task, or given even the privilege. Now, when we see in this Torah portion that he goes up the mountain, he ascends to the mountain to receive the instructions of the Most High, and then brings back those instructions to the people. This intermediary, this emissary of the people, being and yet an emissary of the Most High, being sent back with the message, saying that he's in other words, he's releasing the protocols. It's also very interesting as well that that Yitro is recognizing the special position that Moses has. A lot of times we look at it as Moses as being the prime minister of Israel. Well, I really think I don't really like that term. That, he's the governmental representative before Pharaoh. He is the one who, like a prime minister, but I just don't think that gives enough justice to who Moses is, because Moses is in a supreme position of not only going and representing the people before Moses as an ambassador, but also going before Pharaoh, but also representing, saying, I am an emissary of the Most High, and you better listen. Because if you don't listen, it's not going to turn out well for you. And that's what the whole study about all of the plagues of Israel is about. And so we see that with Yitro is not only that Moses respects him by bowing down before him, but it also says something about, okay, Midian. Okay, we were talking about Eden, Gan Eden. And that is the place, if you look in the garden, it was a place of judgment, right? But remember that judgment is when it relates, it can relate to consequences, a judgment that's being handed out in terms of edicts from the throne or the judge. Yeshua, we see over in James chapter 4 verse 12 that Yeshua is both the lawgiver, that he's the one who gives the Torah, and judge. So that also gives us an idea back in the garden when we see that judgment is released, or judgment is given over Adam and Mrs. Adam in the garden, then who would be the one that's giving the judgment? That because he says, I gave you these instructions which you failed to obey, so now here are the consequences that I'm going to hand out to Adam and Mrs. Adam and the serpent, the one who deceived, that got into the garden, that for some reason Adam did not keep out of the garden, but was allowed to give his voice, his opinion, with that deceiving voice in the garden. So the ability to see proper judgment is supposed to be in a place that there is a tree of the knowledge of good and evil, a place where you'd say, well, I can eat of this fruit and be able to discern, or because I'm in this garden, then I have been given the ability to see beyond. I don't need to eat of a particular fruit in order to engage, because I can see beyond to walk with the one who gives judgment in the garden. And so Yitro now is now, if you kind of see, he's a priest of Midian. He is a high priest. He's in this special role that even Moses would bow down to. And Moses is in the special role of the tribe of Levi, yet he's not the high priest. In fact, at this point in time, Aaron's not even the high priest. Yet but Yahweh wants Moses and all of Israel to recognize that there's a special place for Aaron as well, because Aaron is the one who met Moses in the wilderness. It was Aaron who went with Moses to speak with Moses before Pharaoh. And I would say that it was Aaron that was also a voice that doubled Moses' voice to all the children of Israel in Egypt, and by which also here in this Torah portion that we see that Aaron is invited up the mountain with Moses. So it tells us that, yes, Yahweh is recognizing that there's a special role of Aaron, and yet we see a lot of different things that take place between this point in time in Exodus all the way until Leviticus and Vayikra, where Aaron and his sons are set apart as priests. All of that has to fit into this picture that's being done, and so I would even suggest that one actually operates in a position before one is actually appointed and anointed for that position. In other words, when God calls somebody, it doesn't necessarily have to be through a recognition by man to be set apart and appointed and anointed. Like we see in modern day churchianity, or shall we say, even in placing people in as elders within a congregation. Oftentimes we see one that's set aside, consecrated for before the people, and that the other elders will come and lay their hands upon that one who's being set aside to recognize them in that special place. And a lot of times with laying on of the hands comes the prayer. It also comes with a prophetic words over that person that before the people sets that person in that position where it's recognized as a set apart position before the people. And so Moses and Aaron operating in their roles, their special roles. Aaron as a firstborn, in the tribe of Levi, recognize above, the other, the other cousins as set apart for the high priesthood. And we're talking not in terms of the roles of the Levites, the Levi, within, like the temple services, the tabernacle services, and all that sort of thing, as we see later on, but and what they're supposed to do. But we also want to recognize that Aaron and his sons are set apart for this priestly role, this high priestly role, where they would represent, the people before Yahweh, and to bring the word of instruction to the people, and be able to bring those offerings and minister before Yahweh, to bring those sweet, fragrant offerings before Yah. So, okay, so back to Yitro, the friend of Yah, Ruel, the friend of Yah, and the friend of Elohim, which he's a priest of Midian. And we go back in terms of that word Midian, where we have that same root, the dawn, noon. Those two letters are connected. So Midian, we throw in a mem at the beginning, which talks about the waters, or shall we say a well. It also speaks of the blood. It has two ideas of that which is the waters that bring the washing, the cleansing and the purification, the waters that bring forth the rivers of living water that flow from the throne. But it also gives an idea of, and also the blood that is part of the flow of the consecration, that comes that brings the setting apart of a people, as in circumcision. And yet there's the other side of the waters of chaos. And so when one is in a priestly role, one can bring chaos into the congregation or into the people, because they're bringing forth a wrong word because of the wrong, listening to the wrong voices. And I say the wrong voices are, we think about what the voices of other people, maybe, because they're listening to the people, and then delivering leadership because they are being led by the people. In other words, maybe as in a position of a hireling, or they're listening to the voices of other gods. And which is what Jethro is, if you look at the writings of the rabbis, or you look at other commentaries, and they say, well, he was a pagan priest, and then he comes to his conversion with Moses, maybe. But I would like to suggest that there's more to the background of Yitro, considering he's called the friend of Yah, and he's a descendant of Abraham. Even though he's not of the bloodline that comes through Isaac, that we recognize that there's still something special because of this bloodline that comes through Abraham, the friend of God. And Midian. Now, so this is also a very interesting connection, because Midian, being a descendant of Abraham and of Keturah, that we also have this idea of that which is flowing, because of the mem. The idea of in the Paleo-Hebrew of the mem is an idea of water and of blood, that which would flow. And we have a lot of, maybe some other things to talk about here. That which is flowing, Mid-Dayan, we have between the Dalet and the Nun Safit is the Yod, which is the connector. So what is really being connected here for us is perhaps not just water, but also the connection of blood. And so therefore this role of Midian is also connecting us to something maybe that tells us to look back at the garden. Because when we go back to the garden, we had something that brought chaos and confusion. Why? Because they're listening to the wrong voice, Adam and Mrs. Adam. But we also can look at it in terms of a covenant that is cut, something that is cut in the garden. And what would be cut in the garden, but we see in Genesis chapter 3, verse 21, and Yahweh Elohim made garments of skin for Adam and his wife and clothed them. So, in other words, well, let's read verse 22. Then Yahweh Elohim said, behold, the man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil. And now let us stretch out his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever. Therefore, Yahweh Elohim sent him out from the garden of Eden, or from Gan Eden, to cultivate the ground which he was taken. And he drove man out at the east of the garden of Eden. He stationed the two cherubim and the flaming sword, which turned every direction to guard the way to the tree of life. So we have an implication here, a suggestion that it doesn't say that a covenant was cut, but what we do see is that an animal was slain, which I would like to say is probably maybe a ram that was slain from the foundation of the earth, a ram that gave up its life to become a covering, a garment for Adam and his wife because the fig leaves weren't enough. It is an idea that a skin was made because something had to give up its life. In other words, something that was innocent shed its blood back in the garden. And so Midian gives us an idea of something that flowed at Adon, something that flowed at Adon. And so we have now a place where the children of Israel have come. We have now a place where the high priest of Midian, representing Midian, a place where blood and water flowed, is now coming to meet Moses at Mount Horeb, Mount Sinai, twin mountains, two mountains by which Moses set up camp, and he set up a tent, because it also says that here that they came and in chapter 18, verse 7 of Exodus, then Moses went out to meet his father-in-law, and he bowed down and kissed him, and they asked each other of their welfare, and they went into the tent. Now, this is very interesting to me as well, is that first off, Moses came out of the tent, or it gives an implication here that he went out to meet him, and after the protocols, and asking each other welfare. How you doing, buddy? It's good to see you. Type of thing. And then it says, and he went into the tent. And they went into the tent. Now, this is really a special thing as well, because there's something about the tent of Moses, because Moses would go and sit in front of the tent, his tent, and judge the people. And it gives us an idea that as he sits among the people, that he would go and inquire of Yahweh. Chapter 18, verse 15, and Moses said to his father-in-law, because the people come to me to inquire of Yahweh, and that is the reason why they're all coming to him. And so this is from where the counsel of Yitro is given to him, that, get some others to help you out, delegate. So this is a special tent. A lot of times we think of Jacob, who was a man of the tents. In other words, it's like the tent of Abraham, where what was taught from the tent of Shem, from the tent of Abraham, and where did Jacob go and spend time to learn? He went to his father Abraham, to his grandfather Abraham, to learn, to sit at his feet in the counsel of Yahweh. So we have the picture that the idea of the tent is the place where we hear the instructions of Yahweh, or you can also say the Torah, which is the instructions of Yahweh. And who gets to go into the tent? Well, not everybody gets to go into the tent. And who goes into the tent? It doesn't say anything about Zipporah and his two sons going into the tent. It just says that Yitro and Moses went into the tent. And so this special place would mean that not everybody gets to go into the tent. And it would also speak that it's a type and shadow of the tabernacle that's supposed to be built. And we know in the time of the tabernacle, that's where Moses and Aaron go in to inquire of Yahweh. So when Yitro, a high priest, it actually represents that not everybody gets to go in, but Yitro gets to go in. Because why? Because he's a high priest. And it also speaks of, well, then how would one that is a pagan priest get to go into the tent of Moses? Because we always talk about this. Be careful about who you allow into your house. Be careful about who you allow to step across your threshold. Because we don't want to just allow any type of pagan, any type of one that is representing, when I say pagan, we're talking, one who's representing kingdoms of darkness, to allow across the threshold to come into the household, to come into the tent, or the type and shadow of the temple. Isn't that what our homes are supposed to be? And are we not supposed to be high priests of our homes? So Yitro gets to come in. He gets to go cross the threshold into the tent of Moses. And so this is a very special place that I think that we need to recognize that it's not just one who is a pagan priest, but perhaps the one who has been maintaining a proper priesthood outside of the tribes of Israel. Doesn't that give you an idea of something else that would speak of another priesthood then, that is represented by Moses and perhaps maybe Yeshua, who and perhaps even you look at all the other descendants of Adam. I like to talk about one like Enoch. Enoch was not a Jew, in terms of using this universal term of Jew as one would be who is a descendant of Abraham, but as one who is a descendant of Adam, who has these incredible encounters, because he goes and spends time in the heavenly tabernacle, the heavenly palaces of the Most High, as we've been studying on walking in spirit of truth. So if you missed that, we have the whole series that we've been just going through on a journey here on the series here on the Life of Worship Ministries YouTube channel. So so we do see that there's more to the story in terms of who Yitro is, and yet there's something that's also very interesting about this connection that Yitro reveals by what he says. In verse 8, it says, and Moses told his father-in-law all that Yahweh had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the hardship that had befallen them on the journey, and how Yahweh had delivered them. So, and Yitro rejoiced over all the goodness which Yahweh had done to Israel in delivering them from the hand of Egypt. So Yitro said, blessed be Yahweh who delivered you from the hand of the Egyptians and from the hand of Pharaoh, and who delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Which is, this is also priestly language, because of what he says, blessed be Yahweh who delivered you. So think about that, is whenever we say, may Yahweh bless you, isn't it like in the Aaronic blessing, it is a pronouncement of the priesthood. Well, then it's only reserved for the high priest. But just think about the order that was established by Yeshua, the order of Melchizedek. And so therefore, we have one who is blessing, sending and evoking a blessing before the Most High. He's saying, isn't that what a high priest would do? Because specifically, he says Yahweh. He's not pronouncing it upon any as evoking a blessing to any other Elohim, so to speak, but to Yahweh alone. And then in verse 11, this is also very unique in what he says. Now I know that Yahweh is greater than all the Elohims. This is also very interesting to also note, because we've taught about the Elohim. I've actually talked about in terms of the revelation that's come through the library, the Qumran library, in the high priestly library that was found and stored up in Qumran, and other places as well, the library that was in Egypt, as that holds to the different writings, even the extra biblical writings that were held with reverence and authority by the true descendants of that come through the line of Eleazar, not Eleazar, through the line of Aaron, that descend down through to Zadok, the high priest with David, and handed down through the priesthood. So let's look at it that way. I think it's Eleazar, yeah. So as opposed to Ithamar, Ithamar was not the legitimate priesthood, because the priesthood had to come because of the zeal of Yahweh that Pinchas revealed and exemplified. All right, so let's look at this. And now I know that Yahweh is greater than all of the gods. Indeed, it is proven when they dealt proudly against the people. So, all right, let's go back. We're going to go back and look at Exodus chapter 18 and break down this word here in Exodus chapter 18, verse 11. And I'm pulling up my eSword here because I wanted to do this connection. This word is now. Now, I mean, a lot of times we look at all these other words that are built in within the sentences, and sometimes these little descriptor words like now is oftentimes overlooked, and yet it's really weighty when we see something that is being revealed to us, and now I know that Yahweh is greater than all the Elohim, for in the things wherein they dealt proudly, he was above them. So talking about the Egyptians. And the word now is the word atah. It is the word of the ayin, the tav, and the hay. So there's something that is actually being revealed here when we go back to the Paleo Hebrew. Specifically, it's talking about, about now a period of time has passed, and now a new period. It's almost like a new period, or at the present time. It kind of gives us that idea that something is about to be spoken, something is about to be revealed. And so when we look at the ayin gives us the idea of a vision, or that which is to be seen, and maybe something that is to be seen beyond that which is in the natural. So it gives us an indication that something has now been revealed, maybe something that has been opened up in Yitro's understanding, in the eye of his understanding, or the mind of his understanding, that he didn't have before. Some are saying, well, this is Yitro's conversion. I think the rabbis talk about this as his conversion. But I would say, no, I think he stepped into a new reality because of his position as a high priest that he has been guarding and protecting, talking about the blood and the water of judgment, which Midian gives us an idea of. Okay, so where it says now, it also, when we break it down into that word, it means now, or in phrases. But it also gives us an idea of henceforth, now, straightway, or this time, or whereas. And how, in other words, what is it really talking about? The ayin, and the tav, and the hay. Now the tav is that picture in the Paleo of the X, or the sign of the covenant, the sign of the cross in particular. So see the covenant, and of course the hay at the end brings revelation. In other words, now we have something that's been revealed that speaks of covenant, and I want you to see it. So I want you to see the covenant that is revealed henceforth. Henceforth, there's something that's been revealed about a covenant and a covenant people, a covenant that has been made, a covenant that's been revealed. And so now when he says, now I know, in other words, now revelation has been brought to me that Yahweh is greater than all the Elohim. So there's something here that's saying, I want to show you something. And because of this revelation in verse 12, then Yitro, Moses' father-in-law, took a burnt offering and sacrifices for Elohim. And Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat a meal with Moses' father-in-law before Yahweh. So who is able to bring a burnt offering? Who is able to bring a sacrifice like this other than one who is in the priesthood? And who is it that, and why would Moses and Aaron and the elders of Israel come and sit before him and partake of a meal if this is a pagan priest? Of course, they wouldn't do that, would they? I think they would know the difference because they just came out of the land of paganism. They just came out of the land of all these other gods that were defeated. And now another pagan priest has come before him offering sacrifices. Or I would suggest that he is actually outside of this priesthood that is being established within Israel, and yet a parallel priesthood that is representing a different order, or a Melchizedek. He is a righteous king, a righteous royalty bringing a sacrifice. And that's why Moses and Aaron, these elders of Israel, would sit down with him. And that's why I don't necessarily agree that this was his conversion, except now he sees a greater revelation that Yahweh has shown him that goes above and beyond the deliverance of Israel out of Egypt, by which he sees Yahweh, because that's what he calls him, Yod-He-Vav-He, Yehovah, some people might want to say, that is being revealed here greater than all of the Elohims of Egypt, because is he referring to all of the Elohim, that as if he's a pagan priest that is representing all of these gods of from his pagan worship? Or is he saying, look, I see Yahweh greater than all of these defeated Elohim of Egypt? Which I would want to lean towards the latter, but study it out, recognize it, but recognize that it was his position is so powerful, and recognize, as from Moses and Aaron, the 70 elders, these elders of Israel, that he would that they would sit down and partake in a meal with him. So this whole idea of the ayin, the tav, and the hey is also revealed to us in other words that are used and translated, like in the King Jimmy version would say it's translated not only just as now, but it's also translated as forth, as henceforth, as hitherto. It's most dominantly translated as now in so many different verses. But let's look at see perhaps maybe how it's revealed in other verses. So when it's used as forth, like in Psalm 113 verse 2, blessed be the name of Yahweh from this time forth and forevermore. So and also Psalm 115:18, but we will bless Yahweh from this time forth and forevermore, praise Yahweh. And also in Psalm 121:8, where it says, Yahweh shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and even forevermore, is something being revealed to us through the writer of the psalm, of these psalms, that is all of a sudden has inspired the psalms itself. So I'm going to go over here to Psalm 113 verse 2. Psalm 13 verse 2, beginning with verse 1, praise Yahweh, praise, O servants of Yahweh, praise the name of Yahweh. Blessed be the name of Yahweh from this time forth and forever. From the rising of the sun to its setting, the name of Yahweh is to be praised. So something has happened that has inspired the writing of this psalm, and that is actually saying, whoa, I just had another download. Blessed be the name of Yahweh from this time forth and forever. That is that word, this time forth. In other words, blessed be the name, where it's translated in other places, blessed be the name of Yahweh now and forever. Why? Because there's been a mark. It's like a milestone. Has something, there's been this life of what we've done up to this point, and then there's this download. I'm going to sit it down in stone. I'm going to put a marker that's down and saying, wow, something's happened. I'm going to underline this scripture. Yahweh just revealed something to me. And we see that in that psalm. Now, what about over in Psalm 115, verse 18? So, which is now at the very end of the verse, but as for me, we will bless Yahweh from this time forth and forever. Praise Yahweh. Why? Because he just talked about these in verse, go back to the beginning of Psalm 115, verse 1. Not to us, O Yahweh, not to us, but to thy name give glory, because of thy loving kindness, because of thy truth. Why should the nations say, where now is their Elohim? But our Elohim is in the heavens. He does whatever he pleases. Their idols are silver and gold, the works of man's hands. They have mouths, but they cannot speak. They have eyes that cannot see. They have ears that cannot hear. They have noses that cannot smell. They have smell. They have hands, but they cannot feel. They have feet, and they cannot walk. They cannot make a sound with their throat. Those who make them will become like them, everyone who trusts in them. O Israel, trust in Yahweh. He is their help and their shield. And it goes on, O house of Aaron, trust in Yahweh. And it goes on from that, and you can read the whole. But as for us, we will bless Yahweh from this time forth forever. Praise Yahweh. That's a direct connection in this psalm to this Torah portion. And I would even say, Yitro saying, look how these gods of Egypt who don't have mouths, who do not have ears, who do not have eyes, they can't even talk to you or represent themselves to anybody with any type of ability, because they are idols, and they were defeated. They had a hold on all of Egypt, and Egypt had to see that they were defeated. And so I would even, so from this, I would suggest that Yitro's not saying he's greater than all the gods I've been serving. He's saying they're greater than all the gods of Egypt, the superpower of the world, defeated by the Most High. There's a special place, and Moses says, you're welcome into my tent. Because not everybody's welcome to come into Moses' tent. Not any of the people of Israel. They had to come before him to Moses at his tent, but not inside the tent with them. But Moses would go inside the tent to inquire of Yahweh. So I think that's why this is really, I think, explosive in terms of, in my opinion, I mean, this revelation. In other words, here's a milestone and a marker. Now I know. Now I know. Just as the psalmist is writing and saying, now I know, as in Psalm 130, verse 2, blessed be the name of Yahweh from this time forth and forever. Now I know there's something even great about his name. Now I know that he's greater. And in Psalm 115, he's saying, look, as for me, we're going to bless Yah from this time forth. Because why? Because of these idols. And yet here in this Torah portion, where we have in the 10 commandments that we are given here in the second commandment, where it says, you shall have no other gods before me. And the next one, you shall not make for yourselves an idol or any likeness of what is in heaven above, or on earth, or beneath, or in the water under the earth. You shall not worship them or serve them, for I, Yahweh, your Elohim, am a jealous El, visiting the iniquity of the fathers and the children on the third and fourth generations of those who hate me. In fact, one who is worshiping or setting up things in their own image, a Yeshua, a Jesus in their own image, or setting up even specific idols, having a prayer altar in one's house where they have different iconic images set up with candles being lit or whatever. These are all images that are in the face of Yahweh, and he says, I don't like that. In fact, he uses the word saying, you put these things before me, you say you worship me, and you've made these people who are righteous people into gods, and you pray to them. You hate me. You hate me. Why do you hate me like this? Don't do that. So so we see that type of connection. And every time we see that word now or henceforth or forth, I think we can probably say, wait a minute, there's a revelation that has just been made, and something that has brought me up to this point in my life has now been elevated to another level, another place. As in Psalm 131:3, let Israel hope in Yahweh from henceforth and forever. And why would he say that? Because a revelation has been given, and now hope has been elevated to another place. Let's look at another verse. Psalm 125, verse 2. And the mountains around about Jerusalem, as the mountains are round about Jerusalem, so Yahweh is round about his people from henceforth, even forever. That's the word, from now, even forever. That word, henceforth, now. In other words, now I want you to look from this mountain. As you see the mountains around Jerusalem, I want you to see my power. I want you to see my glory. I want you to see it like you've never seen it before. And so even by Yitro's statement here in verse 11, now I know, he's making a pronouncement. I want you to know that even from my position, in this position as a high priest, I want you to know that outside of your world, where you have seen the deliverance of Yahweh, I want you to know and understand that this is let me suggest that this is not for you alone, but this is for all the nations to see. And I think that this is why this encounter that Moses is having with his father Yitro is so significant. It's really significant, but it's also exemplified as well by the name that he gave one of his daughters, one of the 7 daughters, Zipporah. Now, I would need to look at this a little bit more closely to see in terms of, well, who is Zipporah? Is it perhaps that Zipporah was the firstborn daughter given to Moses? And so now we have this marriage of Moses, by the way, that marries Moses into the family of this priesthood that's outside of Israel. This is where I think also gives us another clue or another revelation in terms of Moses. Because did you ever ask the question, why was Moses not high priest? Aaron, his brother, was high priest of Israel, but Moses was not. Moses was not sacrificing and bringing burnt offerings before the Most High. But we see we see Aaron doing it. Of course, we can say, well, Aaron was the firstborn, and then therefore, rightly so, as the firstborn, that was his role. Okay, as a high priest. But yet here Moses now married into the family of Yitro, who is the high priest, which sets him apart. It sets him apart in this unique relationship between Midian and Israel. And therefore we get another clue or an idea or an understanding that which gives us, well, let's look at something. Let's look at let's go to chapter 19. In verse 1, in the 3rd month after the sons of Israel had gone out of the land of Egypt, on that very day they came into the wilderness of Sinai. All right, let me just pause right there, and I want you to look at the day that they've come before the mountain. It was on the 3rd month, on the very day that they came out of Egypt. Well, when did they leave Egypt? They left on the 15th day of the 1st month. So now we're on the 15th day of the 3rd month. And it's out of this that we have Shavuot. And I want you to go back and if you look at the priestly calendar, and this is why we've been teaching the priestly calendar, is that it doesn't work out on any other calendar system to be at the mountain on the same day, on the very day, on the 3 months on the very day that they would have left Egypt. It doesn't work out if you follow the Hillel calendar. It doesn't work out. So, in other words, what do you have to do? You have Passover, that whole week of unleavened bread, and then there's a few days before first fruits, and then you count 7 weeks. And when you count 7 weeks, it brings you to the 15th day of the 3rd month, is the day that we celebrate Shavuot. Did you ever just think about that and think about, wait a minute, because did you ever try to do the math and it didn't work out, and so you had to say, well, we have to trust the rabbis to tell us when all the dates are, and it seems like they never celebrate Shavuot on the right day, because it's always on the 6th of Sivan, the 3rd month that they celebrate it, because they started on the wrong day, and so therefore you can see why the priestly calendar makes sense. And if you wonder, like, what are you talking about the priestly calendar? Well, go back and listen to our series at the Life of Worship Ministries YouTube channel, or refresh your memory on it and go back, and because Pastor Sandi was starting out with what Eddie Chumney had brought us, and then Pastor Sandi just breaking it down and just gives us all these different things. Well, this is another one of those things where it doesn't work out when they're celebrating Shavuot, this day, this set apart day, when Yahweh comes and gives the Torah on the mountain. It doesn't work out on any other calendar system. So that's just a side note. So the very fact now that it goes on about, well, Moses' role. Okay, when they set out, verse 2, when they set out from Rephidim, they came to the wilderness of Sinai and camped in the wilderness, and there Israel camped in front of the mountain. So here they are, they're in front of the mountain. And so we always look at it as like Mount Sinai, but in other places we see Mount Horeb. And so we know that this mountain system, this mountain of Yahweh has 2 peaks on it, and the peaks is Mount Sinai, Mount Horeb. And Moses went up to Elohim, and Yahweh called to him from the mountain, saying, thus you shall say to the house of Jacob, Yaakov, and tell the sons of Israel, you yourselves have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Well, okay. Remember back, Exodus chapter 3, where Moses has an encounter on a particular mountain where this bush, this tree, catches fire. This tree catches fire, and it causes Moses to turn from, keeping the flock, to turn over and say, what is this? And he's told, you are on holy ground. Take off your sandals, right? Okay, so I'm going over there right now so we can look at this. And chapter 3, verse 1 of Exodus. Now Moses was pasturing the flock of Jethro, Yitro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of Elohim. There you go. And the angel of Yahweh appeared to him in a blazing fire from the midst of the bush, and he looked, and beheld, the bush was burning with fire, yet the bush was not consumed. And Moses said, I must turn aside now. I bet you that's the word atah. I don't know. I have to look at that. And see this marvelous sight. Yeah, I'm going to look at that. What is that the word? Is that it? Is that the word? We're going to look at it. Exodus chapter 3, verse 3. Well, it's not there. Okay, so we're going to look at that. That's worth researching out another time. But that word atah is actually used in verse 9. And it says, I must turn aside now and see this marvelous sight, why the bush is not burned up. When Yahweh saw that he turned aside to look, Elohim called to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moshe, Moshe, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. And he said, Do not come near here. Remove your sandals from your feet, from the place on which you are standing is holy ground. He also said, I am Yahweh your father. I am Yahweh of your father, the El of Abraham, the El of Isaac, and the El of Yaakov. Then Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at Elohim. And Yahweh said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have gone and have given heed to their cry because of their taskmasters, for I am aware of their suffering. So I have come down to deliver them from the power of the Egyptians and to bring them up from that land and to the good and spacious land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites and the Hittites and the Amorites and the Perizzites and the Hivites and the Jebusites. And now, behold, the cry of the sons of Israel has come to me. Furthermore, I have seen the oppression with the Egyptians are oppressing them. Okay, so think about this. Where is he? He's on Mount Horeb, right? This is what we're talking about. This is this mountain that he's come to. And now it says that Moses is at the mountain, and Yahweh and Moses goes up to Yah on the mountain to holy ground. There's something special now. Now we know about Moses being of the lineage of Levi. We know that Levi is in the lineage of Jacob, of the lineage of Isaac, coming from Abraham, and it takes us back to Abraham, and now somehow or another a descendant from Abraham now gives his daughter in marriage to Moses, and it just happens to be that descendant is a high priest of Midian. And Moses now married into this family. Moses now has this really unique relationship because he's by marriage brought into this priestly role, this priestly connection with Yitro, and by bloodline, there's this very interesting priestly role that he's carrying out, and it's twofold. And it gives us an idea of now Moses is now, in my opinion, is representing, because of these connection, a Melchizedek priestly role. He is, as we see that over in Deuteronomy, that it would be one like Moses who would be raised up. So all of Israel is looking for, after this time, centuries, they've been looking for one like Moses that would be raised up. Isn't that what we see in Yeshua, who is a priest in the order of Melchizedek? And so that's why I'm saying that only Moses could go up at this point in time. He's the only qualified. Aaron's not even qualified to go up the mountain without an invitation, because Moses is fulfilling both of these roles, and he is now presenting himself before Yahweh and between the Most High and all of Israel. So he's representing Israel and he's representing the Most High, and that's why we have this exchange that's taking place, and that he is supposed to bring this message. Now then, bring this message to the people. Now then, verse 5, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be my own possession among all the peoples, for all the earth is mine, and you shall be to me a kingdom of priests, a Melchizedek, a royal priesthood, and a holy nation. These are the words that you shall speak to the sons of Israel. So Moses came down and called the elders of the people and set before them all these words which Yahweh had commanded him. And all the people answered together and said, all that Yahweh has spoken, we will do. And Moses brought back these words of the people to Yahweh. So he goes back up the mountain with these words. And so, of course, we have, we know the wedding language that's going on here. And it's also a picture that Moses' wife, a lot of times it's been defined, Zipporah, as one who is divorced, one that's been set apart or separated from. Zipporah, I mean, that's where we get that root word. but it also gives us an idea of a couple other ideas, and that is the idea of being not cut off, but in terms of one that is circumcised, as uh, as we see when Zipporah and Moses and his two sons are heading to Egypt, and the angel of Yahweh stops them, and Zipporah quickly circumcises the two boys, and because it gives an idea of one that circles, when you go back into the roots of the word Zipporah, the name Zipporah. So it's not only just one who, it's not that she was separated as in one who would be divorced from Moses, but she being kept safe and set aside, but is also in that role of the Ezer connector, the one who is looking out and circling round about her husband, her bridegroom, and who, in watching over to protect the bridegroom, sees that something need to be done and circumcises the boys, which is a circular motion, in order to protect the lineage through the circumcision, through the letting of the blood. Well, why would she even know about the letting of the blood other than she's a daughter of the high priest? You know, there's blood. I mean, in other words, this circumcision process. That also tells you something about this priesthood of Yitro and what he raised his daughters, the 7 daughters, which I would say, and we've taught in the past, gives us some parallel understanding of the 7 congregations of the book of Revelation. And which is also gives us an idea too, because of this bridal language and this language of the setting aside of the bride, who is to once again be reunited with her husband in the wilderness, in the place of the wilderness. At what other location? Because I remember I talked about location earlier. What other location would that be? It would be at the foot of the mountain, of the Mount Horeb and Mount Sinai. This interesting place that has 2 peaks, that Moses sees this a place of fire, and this place of fire, a place that was cut off, or Adam and Chava were cut off from. And so now we have this whole idea of the cutting, the whole idea of the separation, the whole idea of the encircling, and what was placed at the gate of the garden, but a cherubim with a flaming sword. And may I suggest to you that beyond a flaming sword that's going back and forth, but this place is the mountain of Yahweh, where the presence of Yahweh is, by which Adam and Mrs. Adam were expelled from, because when they would look back and they would see the fire going back and forth there between the 2 peaks of the mountain, it was like a flaming sword going back and forth. And what are we about to see? What's about to be exposed to us in this amazing picture that's being unfolded and revealed to us right now is not only this conversing and this dialogue that's going on between Moses and the Most High, other than we see where Yahweh tells them, okay, tell the people to stand back, set up a boundary, don't let them cross, because if they cross, it's going to be fatal. It's going to be bad. Because why? Because they need the word, the good word of Yah, to be given to the people, because the good word has been given to Moses already. That's why he's able to go up into the presence of Yah. Moses has received, he was receptive to, and he received the good word. Therefore, he could come before Yahweh, and he could be that emissary, because he did carry out that mission, because he did step into the role of the Melchizedek, and now he's able to come and operate in this position. And in verse 10, where it says, Yahweh also said to Moses, go to the people and consecrate them today and tomorrow. Let them wash their garments and let them be ready for the third day. For on the third day Yahweh will come down on Mount Sinai in the sight of all the people. So that the word needed to come forth, and if they came forth before the word was given, they would surely die. It gives us a picture of what went on in the garden. When Adam and Mrs. Adam ate of the wrong tree, they were eating of the wrong word. They came and they took and partook of the word of the knowledge of the good and evil, the deceptive word of the serpent that said, listen to me, listen to this word. And it caused them to be expelled, and a barrier set forth where the flaming sword, the fire between the mountains, would be revealed to them, and they would never be able to return to it. And so in verse 12, and you shall set bounds for the people all around, saying, beware that you do not go up on the mountain or touch the border of it. Whoever touches the mountain shall surely be put to death. No hand shall touch him, but he shall surely be stoned or shot. In other words, when they cross that barrier, don't even go out and get him, because then that's fatal. He shall surely be stoned or shot through. Whether beast or man, he shall not live. When the ram's horn sounds a long blast, they shall come up to the mountain. In other words, come right up to the border. So Moses went down to the people, and down from the mountain to the people, and consecrated the people, and they washed their garments. And he said, be ready for the third day. Do not go near a woman. So it came about on the third day, when it was morning, that there were thunder and lightning flashes, and a thick cloud upon the mountain, and a very loud trumpet sound, so that all the people who were in the camp trembled. Lightning, the flashing sword, bouncing between the two mountains, being moved, waved back and forth. And Moses brought the people out of the camp to meet Elohim, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. Now get this, and there's more. There's so much more. Continue on with me. And Mount Sinai was all in smoke, because Yahweh descended upon it in fire, and it spoke, and it smoke. Because Yahweh descended upon it in fire, and its smoke ascended, and its smoke ascended like the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mountain quaked violently. And the sound of the trumpet, the sound of the shofar, grew louder and louder. Moses spoke, and Elohim answered him with thunder. Wow. I mean, totally amazing, right? So it begs the question then, was this the gateway to Gan Edon? Gan Edon. Is it a coincidence that Yitro would show up with Zipporah? Was it a coincidence that the high priest of Midian would show up? Is it a coincidence that the name Midian would speak about the place where the blood and the water would flow? Is it a coincidence that in the garden that an animal would give up its skin where the blood would flow? Is it a coincidence that at a particular mountain that Yeshua the Messiah would be hung up on a tree with his arms outstretched, and he would be jabbed in the side, and the blood and the water would flow? Would it be a coincidence that at this place in the mountain, that where the fire would come down, the same fire that was at the burning bush, at the burning tree? Is it a coincidence that perhaps that this is a gateway into the Garden of Eden, that one would no longer be able to see with the natural eyes, but they would be able to see through the revelation, through the now, through the atah, where we have the ayin, the tav, and the hay. The ayin representing the eye, the tav, the covenant, and the hay of revelation. Would it be at this place where the fire would come down, and it would descend, and the smoke would ascend? The sound of the shofar would be so loud, and it would continue to grow. Would it be at this place where the mountain is quaking, where the people are learning now that they've experienced the gods of Egypt? They experienced the defeats of the gods of Egypt, but now they are experiencing the one who delivered them from the gods of Egypt. And that it would be a now moment for them, that which they knew from the past, which they had been walking in a certain level of revelation, now they've been brought to a new level of revelation. Now it is a new chapter in their lives. They can look back at the milestones that brought them to this place, but now through this experience, they are to move forward, and because now their lives have been elevated to a new place, if they would receive that good word. And it says in verse 21, then Moses spoke to Moses, go down, warn the people, lest they break through to Yahweh to gaze, and many of them perish. And also let the priests who come near to Yahweh consecrate themselves, lest Yahweh break out against them. And Moses said to Yahweh, the people cannot come up to Mount Sinai, for thou didst warn us, saying, set bounds about the mountain and consecrate it. Then Yahweh said to him, go down and come up again, you and Aaron with you. And do not let the priests and the people break through to come up to Yahweh, lest he break forth upon them. So Moses went down to the people and told them. So now we have this now we have this invitation. Aaron hadn't come up the mountain at this point in time, but Yahweh now invites him. Why? Because he says, in verse 22, and also let the priests who come near to Yahweh consecrate themselves. And so we have an idea that Aaron consecrated himself, and because he properly did it, maybe he's the first one to do it. Who knows? But also being the firstborn and being the high priest of the home now he is being positioned. This is before the consecration over in Vayikra. This is where one is stepping into the role because it's what's in them. It was in Aaron. It was already in him to meet Moses in the wilderness because something had to be done. And in this position that he is being elevated to and being invited to. And so verse 24 says, you and Aaron with you come up the mountain. And so Moses went down to the people and told them. And then we get to chapter 20, verse 1. Then Yahweh spoke all these words. I am Yahweh, your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. There's your first commandment. He says, in other words, I'm the one. Above anything else, I'm the one. You look to me. I'm the one because I'm the one that did it. I'm the one, and don't put anything else. And that's why we get into the next commandment. Don't have any other Elohim before you, because they didn't do anything except to enslave you. Your lifestyle that you've been living has done nothing except enslave you. But if you will look to me, if you will consecrate yourselves to me, if you will live before me, and if you'll hearken and hear my voice, then truly you've entered into this covenant. And so the giving of the 10 words is more than, how people will say that, I believe in the 10 commandments, except the fourth one. I believe in the 10 commandments because those are words of God. But I'm a New Testament person. No, what we're seeing right here is a covenant if you will see it. If you will have a now moment in your life and come to the revelation that this is a now moment, that the people were not allowed to breach the perimeter of the mountain or they would die. They would surely die. They were not to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil because they would surely die. If in other words, if they took matters into their own hands, they would surely die. And yet he says, I'm going to show you a better way, the place where a tree was on fire in the middle of the mountain, a place where the fire like lightning is bouncing between the peaks, a place where you'll look back and see this cherubim guarding the throne of the Most High, where the fire is. It even looks like a flaming sword being swung back and forth. And so the word of Yahweh goes forth, and we know, there's so much more to break down on this, but for the sake of time, I can't even go there. But I will say this: we can jump forward, verse 18, holding on to the same theme, and all the people perceived. The word is ra'ah. They perceived. It's also the word saw, but they perceived in the natural. But I think what they were perceiving is something even more than in the natural, because I think it goes back to the now, the atah, this idea of seeing the covenant revealed before them. All the people perceived the thunder and the lightning flashes and the sound of the trumpet and the mountain smoking. And when the people ra'ah, when the people saw, my version says saw it, it's in italics. When the people saw, in other words, when they perceived, because it's the same word, they trembled and stood at a distance. And they said to Moses, "Speak to us yourselves, and we will listen. But let not Elohim speak to us, lest we die." Wow. Perhaps another serpent had entered into their thought process, maybe a deception, because of the tree of the knowledge of the good and evil, because of the idols of Egypt still whispering in their ears, that perhaps that with that they remembered the story in the garden, that wait a minute, that did not end up well, because it brought death. We don't want to die, because and it says so the people stood at a distance. They kept Yah at arm's length, and while Moses approached the thick cloud where Elohim was, then Elohim said to Moses, "Thus you'll say to the sons of Israel, you yourselves have seen that I have spoken to you from heaven." Right? In other words, you have there's that word ra'ah. There's this perception that goes beyond the physical. You've seen past the material world. You've seen into the supernatural. You shall not make other gods besides me. You shall not make other gods besides me. Other gods is in italics. So you shall not make other me. In other words, your attention should not be on anything else except me. Gods of silver or gods of gold, you shall not make for yourselves. And then it goes on and it says some very interesting thing. So he's repeating this thing. Why? I mean, this whole idea is that, wait a minute. Yahweh's saying, I'm revealing myself. You're hearing my own voice, because I want the fear of Yahweh to be in you, so that there will be nothing else that would want to even be able to gather your attention from me, to draw you away, to speak, to entice you, to deceive you, even to thinking that you've got to carry life on your own shoulders, because in and of itself, that's a God. But if you'll just hearken unto my voice, then you'll surely live. If you'll eat of the tree of life, you shall truly live. If you will have this now moment in your life where you come to this place where the blood and the water flows, you shall truly live. Because I'm going to show you, I'm going to punctuate it with one other thing. I'm going to show it to you right now in this. You shall not make an altar of earth for me, or you shall make an altar of earth for me, and you shall make sacrifice on it, your burnt offerings and your peace offerings, and your sheep and your oxen, and your sheep, there we go back to the garden again, and your oxen, in every place where I cause my name to be remembered, I will come to you and bless you. And if you make an altar, and if you make an altar of stone for me, you shall not build it of cut stones, or if you wield your tool on it, you will profane it. In other words, you're going to use it from that which I created, not from that which you have fashioned for yourselves. And you shall not go up by steps to my altar, that your nakedness may not be exposed on it. And that is also one unique thing as we close some ideas out for you today, because emphasizing this whole idea of this pagan connection, because of the sacrificial altars of the pagan world. I mean, even in Egypt. One obvious thing is the idea of having steps reveals nakedness, and so uh, but really what it is telling us is something more, and I think it takes us back to the garden as well, is having steps, because what did Adam and Mrs. Adam find? How did they find themselves after they ate of the fruit of the garden, out of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? They found themselves naked. They found themselves naked. Now, this is so he's saying, look, I'm going to tell you this because I know you already understand this, because in ancient Middle Eastern pagan worship, that when one has an altar that burns, what do you have? You have a series of steps. Well, we get the visual that the priest is going to be wearing a long robe, but in terms of lifting up one's knee to go to the next step, then more of the body could possibly be seen. We don't want that. So going to the altar, it would be on the same level ground as every place, as where all the people of Israel are. Or if it is in a place that's a little bit higher for people to see, that there would be a ramp up to it, as opposed to a step. But there's this so this idea of modesty is brought in, but that's really kind of on the really surface level, because in the pagan practices, that they would have altars built with steps, and their rituals often involved elaborate, dramatic ascents to the altar, sometimes accompanied by ecstatic or immodest behavior. And so by forbidding the steps, what we're seeing emphasized here is a different approach to worship, one that's focused on humility and modesty and the holiness of Yah. And shall I also say that it is also, it also shows that of Yah's humility, where he comes down on the level of man. And there we get that picture of Yeshua that's lifted up on the tree, and where he says, if I be lifted up, I'll draw all men unto myself. So we have that whole idea of equality, and the absence of the steps brings this idea, not saying that Yah is that we find ourselves equal with Yah, but he wants to relate to us on our level where we're at. And he doesn't want these grandiose structures or hierarchical displays. He doesn't want a ziggurat, right? Where one would ascend a whole series of steps where the altar would be so high above everything. Even where, let's set up this altar on Mount Carmel, and where Elijah would be able to make a mockery of them. We see that. So along with it, the pagan practices that were often were I mean, they were actually not only just dramatic and theatrical, but base. To the point of, even in the Egyptian priests, which would minister before the altars in a naked or a semi naked dress. I mean, this is where they felt like they had to go down to that level to connect with that the base level of their creation. What would be the best way to say that? it would also be like in that level, and this is what the distinction is really what I want to go down to, is not so much the description as that understanding is saying, I want your priesthood, your worship before me to be unlike anything that these, you know, even in the fertility worship, I mean, the stuff that they would do was bad. It was really evil. And and I don't really need to go into any other details about that. Just that understanding when you think about fertility worship, all the stuff with the temple prostitutes and all that stuff that would be brought in and displayed before all the people that could see. So, you know, all the reasons why the whole in the future when the Moabite women would come down into the camp, and that was such a horrific thing, an abomination before Yahweh. And so Yahweh is calling the people, says, I want you to be so elevated that that you know who you are because of this royal priesthood by which I've invited you to. So anyway, I think I'm going to close with that today because and it's so loaded and there's so much to it, but I really hope that you got something out of that. Maybe some of these connections that you hadn't thought about before. Maybe it's some things to chew on for a little bit, and some things to ponder, because as we go forward and we go forward in the golden calf incident, for example, that what did they do? This part right here in Exodus chapter 20, where they've gone into this revelry, which is all part of that pagan worship. They committing adultery before Yahweh, and where they're thinking, you know, well, Yahweh disappeared on us because his representative Moses disappeared on us, and the only thing we know is this paganism, and so there's a lot more to be talked about, maybe at a later Torah portion. But anyway, hope you got something out of that today, and I want you to be blessed. We missed you, those that are local. We missed having you here with us today. We really like having, you know, our local congregation as well as our online congregation, and I certainly appreciate everybody that's joined us online, because that is your comments and everything. I wasn't able to keep up with those. Sorry, because I'm focused on what I feel like the message was for today. And so I pray that you all have a blessed week, and we're going to pray. Father, we just thank you for everybody that's gathered with us today. Let healing continue to flow, bolstered immune systems, and that strength will be restored to our bodies, and that which you are doing within us is a good work. It's a tov work. It's a complete work, all so that we can have ears to hear what your spirit, what your ruach is saying to us. That word that was a strong word here in Exodus chapter 20, but it wasn't meant to be a strong word as much as putting the fear of Yah within us, so we can see the loving kindness of how you have done everything that you could, so that when that spoken word came down, then we would be ready to receive it. And when we receive that word, Yeshua, the Word, the living Word, where the blood and the water flowed, that we would be able to enter into your presence, and we too would be able to ascend the mountain. So, Father, we just bless you to ascend the mountain, to enter into the Gan Eden, to enter into the Garden of Eden that was once cut off. But, Father, that we can now perceive and be able to see even from a distance. Father, so we just bless you and we honor you for it, and we give you all of the honor and the glory in the name of Yeshua. Amen.